Great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Actually, this is as close as I can get to the museum at the moment because we're actually working from home at the moment. So, because our state has gone into another pandemic lockdown for a couple of weeks, so we're not able to get on site at the moment, which is unfortunate, but still a lot luckier than a lot of other places in the world. So,
Start by me asking you, how did you become a registrar? Because most kids don't grow up saying, when I grow up, I'm going to be a kick-ass registrar, watch me, right? I have 3 nephews, and if I were to explain to them what the registrar does, they still would say, I hope maybe one of them will say yes, but so what did you want to become when you were growing up, and how did you end up becoming a registrar? Because it's such a specific profession in the museum, in the art world, and a lot of people, forget about the art world or cultural institutional world, even in museums, don't really know what a registrar does, even though your work is so incredibly important.
yes, that's a very good point. I think to be honest, I probably didn't really know myself what a registrar is or what a registrar does when I started being one. It was very much, I don't know, like an arcane science. I knew that, I think before I worked in museums, I didn't really know a lot about all the different roles within a museum. So I think people have heard of curators. They sort of know museums have curators who do the displays and things, but they don't know about a lot of the other stuff that goes on. I did a graduate diploma of museum studies at Deakin University, which is a common sort of pathway to museums for people, particularly in Victoria and Australia, but in Australia as well. And just to sort of learn a bit more about museums and what they do, because I've always sort of liked them and enjoyed museums. How I got to be a registrar was while I was studying my graduate diploma at university, I really wanted to try and get some real museum experience alongside that. So I was quite hesitant about my skill set, I guess, going into that. But I decided to give it a go anyway. So I did apply, and then they obviously thought that I could do the job, so they brought me on to do that. And then I was on a steep learning curve from that point on, just trying to learn all things about registrars and registrations and collections from that point on.
Just walk us through the configuration of Melbourne cricket grounds and the cricket club and the museums that fall under the umbrella. Just give us an idea of what the 3 museums are and who goes under which organization, because it's fascinating. It's one of the oldest continuous cricket and sporting clubs in the world. Founded in 1838, it's the oldest sporting club in Australia, and it's highly respected by obviously the cricket world, which is one of the most popular sports in the world. It's huge. I mean, you just come across references to cricket and cricket clubs, that you would just not think at all. Like aside from the top 10, top 25 countries that play cricket.
The first ever international cricket match was played at this ground in 1877, and there's been all sorts of stuff happen here since. So there's been cricket, football, Australian rules football that is, but also soccer and rugby, and all sorts of things have been happening at this stadium for over 100 years. The club itself, so in terms of museums and heritage collections, there's actually 5 distinct heritage collections which fall under the umbrella of the MCC, which I have a role in managing. So we have 3 museum collections, which is the Gallery of Sport, Australian Gallery of Sport and Olympic Museum collection, which relates to the original incarnation of the Australian Sports Museum, which was a separate purpose-built museum outside the MCG. And it's now sort of moved where our museum is actually inside the MCG now. There's also the National Sports Museum collection, which is now the Australian Sports Museum, which is what we're called. And those two collections, the Gallery Sport Collection and the National Sports Museum Collection, are both public collections. So we as in the club and we as in the museum team here manage those collections, I guess, like on behalf of the public or on the state of Victoria. So even though the MCC manages those collections, doesn't necessarily own them in the same way as they might own their own private collections. So if the club ever, say, folded or disbanded, then those two collections would go to the state of Victoria, basically. So would probably go to another museum within Victoria if that ever happened. The other collections the club have are its own collections, which is the Melbourne Cricket Club Museum Collection, Melbourne Cricket Club Archives, and the Melbourne Cricket Club Library. So we've got a library, we've got an archive, and we've got a museums here. So that they're all the private collections of the club. The library is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, it's certainly one of the biggest collections of sporting related books and resources in the world. In the 1960s, when there was a collector by the name of Tony Bayer, who was English and had a extraordinary and extraordinarily large collection of cricket-related memorabilia. Literally every sort of square inch of his home was covered in prints or pictures or ceramics or all sorts of stuff. And he decided he wanted to give this collection to an institution. He travelled to Australia a lot, and he ended up offering his collection to the club here, and they decided, oh, that would actually be great. So yes, we would like to accept that collection.